Hello everyone. Today we're going to do a really quick causes of World War One video and also talk about the spark that led to World War One. Before we get started, I want you to remember that 19th century was dominated by Europeans, and Europeans went around the globe saying that they were the most civilized civilizations. And then what ends up happening with World War One is we see that the Europeans maybe weren't so civilized. So we're going to build off of that. So when we talk about World War One is a war that is going to touch all of the globe in different ways, which we'll get to at a later time. But today we're just going to kind of go through the causes really, really quickly and discuss it in terms of long and short-term causes. So when we talk about World War One, we're talking about the period from in the first 1914 to really the peace conferences in 1919. And during that time period, we're going to see some of the most violent warfare that the world has ever seen at that point. So let's get started. All right. So in terms of the long-term causes of World War One, I like to use this acronym, which is militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and anarchy. When we talk about militarism, militarism is the buildup of one country's military, strengthening of their weapons, which we see this especially during the beginning of the 20th century because of the Industrial Revolution, right? With the Industrial Revolution is going to come a military buildup. So countries like Germany, nations like England are going to build up their military as well as they're going to build up their industrial strength. So militarism and industrialization go hand in hand. So because of the Industrial Revolution, they developed more advanced weapons you can kill more people, which is great. All right. Also, during this time period, and remember those examples, Germany and England being very advanced, especially in terms of their navies. But Germany is really going to come out on top in terms of military technology. In terms of alliances, there are going to be secret alliances that are going to be set up during the 19th century. And we discussed way back about a balance of power. This kind of blows the whole balance of power out of the water type of deal. Within those alliances, you're going to have, when we say alliances, what that essentially means is that the countries, if one country gets involved, everybody's got to get involved. So secret agreements are going to be made up prior to World War One that are going to add to some of the tension that goes on. When we talk about these alliances, the one thing you have to remember is that if one country gets involved, they're all going to get involved. So we go from there. So when we look at the alliances, just to get an idea, where's the map of the alliances? Of course, it's not here. All right, I'm going to stop this again. Hi everyone. Today we're going to discuss the causes of World War One. We're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. Remember that World War One is going to be the beginning of the 20th century, so you're looking at the time period between 1914 and really 1919 when all the peace conferences are made. When you think about World War One and you think about the causes of World War One, you have to think back to the 19th century. Even though during the 19th century the Europeans were dominant and the Europeans were going around the globe and they were conquering and they were doing all those things, saying that they were superior to everybody else, the white man's burden, and that they were civilized, what we find is that during World War One, we have the tearing down of those old empires. We have the tearing down of Europe as being the civilized people because of the destruction that occurs during the war. So we're going to get started with this right away and keep on going. Right. So, first of all, I like to do the long-term cause of the World War One, and the long-term causes of World War One are just going to bring tension to the situation. Okay, these things alone in a room are okay, but when you add certain things to them, certain ingredients, it's going to cause them to explode. So I do this little acronym: militarism. It's mania. It's militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and anarchy. When we talk about militarism is just like it sounds. It's the building up of a nation's military. And whenever you see that building up of military, you know that's going to equal tension. So because of the Industrial Revolution, in addition to building up manufacturing capabilities, nations within Europe also build up their military. So countries like Germany and England are really going to advance themselves not only by manufacturing goods, but also in terms of how they're going to increase the ability of their military. When I say increase their ability in the military, they're going to come up with new technology and new ways to kill people. So militarism is going to be a big deal. And always think about this idea of whenever anybody increases the weapons, whether this could be like a street fight or it could be during a war, we know the tension is going to increase. And what essentially is happening prior to World War One is you're having like an arms race about building up technology. So this military technology is going to be very important. Then what we have is we have alliances. During the 19th century, secret alliances were set up prior to World War One that are going to add to the tension. Um, these alliances are going. When we say alliances, what it basically means is that if something happens with one country, everybody else is going to get involved, and that's what essentially is going to happen. It's going to be like a domino effect. Prior to World War One, these were the major alliances. You have the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. The Triple Entente was made up of Great Britain, France, and Russia. And the Triple Alliance, or the Central Powers, right? We're going to use that term also. The Central Powers was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And those 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 alliances are really going to result in this thing with World War One. The only thing that's going to change that you're going to see is that Italy, in the very beginning of the war, is going to switch sides, but we're going to come back to that later on in the video. So these are the alliances, and you could see where Germany is kind of surrounded on both sides, and Austria-Hungary is surrounded on both sides. You could see where this war is going to kind of go, and you could see how these alliances are going to be built up. And this gives you another kind of image of what we're talking about in terms of this alliance system and the central powers. Okay? All right. Now, the next one is nationalism. Obviously, we know what nationalism is. We've discussed it over and over again. And we know that during the industrial age in Europe, there was a lot of competition that was going on between nations of Europe. And we know that that also is going to go on. That's that whole social Darwinism thing we talked about, where the Europeans are really competing with each other for the best economy. But the extreme nationalism takes on a new face. And the reason why it does, it's not just patriotism, where you're like, my country is better than yours, and yay, America. But really, with nationalism, it's more about if you're not American, then you're an enemy. And that's where it really became very important. So you're going to have a lot of nationalist rivalries within Europe. Again, nations like Germany, who was just born, right? Unification was in the 1870s. And nations like England, who were going around and conquering, their feelings of nationalism were very, very intense. So that's going to add to the situation. Additionally, we're going to come back to this later on, there's also the idea of nationalism in terms of what's called self-determination. Self-determination is this idea that you want to govern yourself. And there was a region of Europe called the Balkans, and I'll show you this very quickly, and we're going to come back to it. This is the Balkan region, where nations of the Balkans really wanted to become independent of both the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and this says Turkish Empire, but it's the Ottoman Empire. And they wanted to break away, and they wanted to be independent. That was another thing that was going to add to this tension. So we have that. And we're going to come back to the Balkans in a little bit. But keep in mind and keep that idea ahead that if nationalism, with intense nationalism, comes competition. Okay? The next bullet is imperialism. This actually revolves around the new imperialism, which we just finished discussing. During the new imperialism, as you guys can remember, European nations competed with one another for territories around the globe. One of the best examples we have was the scramble for Africa, when the Europeans raced to Africa to get territories to the point where they had to have the Berlin Conference to kind of settle disputes. But really, that competition remained all over the globe, whether it was in Southeast Asia or whether it was, European nations or foreign powers trying to get spheres of influence in China. There was this outward competition for colonies to further their industrial process and further European wealth. So that was that part of it. And we saw specifically some issues go on between like Germany and France, and we saw some other issues that went on that none of them came to war, but they built up that tension. Then the last part is anarchy, and this is something that's unique that a lot of teachers don't do. But one of the reasons why World War I begins is because there was nobody there to stop it. There was no real peacekeeping organization to say, wait, hold on a second, what are we doing here? And that's going to definitely add to some of the problems that we're going to see here. So anarchy is going to be a big deal, that no peacekeeping organization. So these things alone really are not going to cause much of a problem. They're tension. They're just going to, it's like, making fun of somebody, but then everybody eventually goes too far. And that's where we get to the spark of World War I, which is going to involve this region down here, which is the Balkan region of Europe, okay? The Balkan region, which is going to be known as what's called the powder keg. So this region right here, where you find modern-day Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, what eventually become Bosnia, and you have Greece here. And we learned that the Ottoman Empire is definitely collapsing. You can see it better on this map too. We learned a while ago that the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, and we know that nationalism was growing in this region of Europe because they wanted to be independent. And as a result of that, revolutions and rebellions began to occur in the name of their ethnicity. And the nationalist movement in the Balkans centered around a notion of what's called Pan-Slavism. Pan-Slavism is nationalism for the Slavic people. Slavism is an ethnicity. And what ends up happening is things get tense. And you guys have heard this story, and there's a video attached, so I'm not going to go crazy with telling you about this. But the spark that ignites World War I revolves around the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand by Gabriel Princip. Gabriel Princip was a Serbian nationalist who wanted his Slavic people to be independent from Austria-Hungary. And as a result of that, on June 28th, 1914, the Archduke Ferdinand was was in almost like a parade, motorcade, and was going around in Sarajevo, the city of Sarajevo in Bosnia, and there was an assassination attempt on his life by a group called the Black Hand, who was a nationalist terrorist organization who was fighting on behalf of the Slavic people. The story you could read about, it's very interesting in the way that it goes. It's like a Hollywood kind of thing. But Gabriel Princip does kill the Archduke Ferdinand, and that sets off a shockwave around Europe. And because of the alliance system, things really take off very quickly. And this is that idea of a powder keg again, that anything that happens in that region is going to result in World War I. So what I want to show you guys is this map here, again, of the alliance system. So let's use this one instead. So there were different alliances that were set up, like we talked about prior to World War I. One of the groups that had the support of Serbia or the Slavic people was Russia. And as you could see from this map, Russia was an enemy of Austria-Hungary. So you already see the conflict there. So what ends up happening is after the assassination of the Archduke, there's going to be a chain reaction. And that chain reaction is going to result in this assassination. In the start of World War I. And you could see here, and I'm gonna post these slides for you guys on Classroom, but you could see how quickly it happens, where Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Serbia, obviously, because the Serbian nationals killed their Archduke. And then you could see, because Austria-Hungary gets involved, Germany is going to declare war on Russia, which is kind of preemptive. Then Germany is going to declare war on France, and then you could see United. And you could see that it all kind of drops like dominoes. And eventually, all of Europe is going to be engaged in this war because of that assassination, right? The events are going to happen really, really fast, and everybody's going to get involved, okay? And here's kind of like some cartoons that go along with it. You could see everybody kind of going after each other, and, some people, you see the American on the back who's not getting involved, and you can see the Italians who really are kind of not involved. There's this notion that this chain reaction, is just going to happen. Now, if you remember from your 8th grade social studies, at the end of World War I, Germany is going to be blamed, and they're going to have to sign the Treaty of Versailles. But I want you to take a look at this cartoon. This is a famous cartoon that you might have looked at in 8th grade. And I want to point out a couple of things to you. So this is, you're looking at this, and all of these people are looking at each other. You could see the Italians, they kind of have their hands folded because they're not involved at first. But you could see that they're all kind of pointing at each other. Because if you think about the start of World War I and what we've talked about in this video, everything that's going on here, it was really everybody's fault. Nobody was willing to stop it. And that's why you have this hand up here in the corner, and it's pointing at this figure in the back, which says, it's supposed to be like the death of Europe. This is a dagger going through the chest of Europe. And what it's essentially saying is that it's all of your faults. And that all of this could have been prevented earlier on. So this is essentially what World War I was. This was the cause of it. We're going to spend more time going through this. I also posted some videos for you guys, or a video rather, for you guys to look at as well. If you need to watch this again, of course, make sure you take notes. But you could see that the causes of World War I, if you go back to the long-term causes, are going to build up that tension. And then it's going to take the assassination of the Archduke to really cause that chain reaction that's going to start the war. Okay? So I'm going to post this, and yeah.